Our mission is love. Our vision is love. Jamaicans for justice. The people's champion, champion, champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, the people demand. Right to life and security. Oh, what a joy. Oh,
Right.
what a
Happy Tuesday. Welcome to another episode of Let's Start Justice. It's actually a rainy day in Kingston, Jamaica. So we are shuttered in, if you will, here at the JFJ's office. So Jade and I, we're joining you outside of the Bridge studio. So I trust that we will make, do with what we have here and still manage to connect together, Jade, yeah?
Absolutely, we're gonna do our best. Not as pretty behind us today, but we'll work with it.
Yes, all right. So thanks again to our listeners. My name is Michael Jackson, Executive Director of JFJ.
And I'm Jade Williams, Policy and Advocacy Specialist at JFJ.
So we have some exciting discussions to be had today. So as we go through the week that was, we're going to be talking, the importance of civic participation and what is happening in the local space regarding local government election. But the substantive topic for today is looking at the Disabilities Act that took several years to be passed, and now that it has, 2 years have since passed. So we're going to be exploring where we are as a country with the Disabilities Act and being compliant with the provisions within it. And that discussion will see Dr. Floyd Morris, who is opposition senator, spokesperson specifically on housing and sustainable living, I believe. The titles were changed a little bit last year, so forgive me, Senator, if we made a little mishap there. And we're also going to be joined by Miss Janelle Williams, who is a legal officer and corporate secretary with the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. I trust I've remembered everything there.
Yes, you did.
As I said, we're not feeling each other's energy, but let's see how best we may do. So just go right into the week that was for the country. What we're going to be having a discussion on, listeners, towards the end of the program is looking at the throne speech that was read. There are some questions coming at us at social media say, why are we making much ado about this throne speech? It's a symbolic thing that ought to be abolished. But we're going to be having discussions about the importance of it and some of the areas that were a little bit missing for us here at JFJ as we do our public advocacy, which a key component of that is policy monitoring for the subject areas that we have. Today is World Day of Social Justice. And why is that important? We want to ensure that we are adhering to the theme of the day, which is bridging gaps, building alliances, and just ensuring that we are looking at things like raising awareness on social inequality, matters relating to poverty, classism in society, whether those are systemic classism issues, to ensure that we all have a place in the Jamaican society. This substantive discussion for me, as we look at the week that was, last week we had a very good topic that was suggested by the team to have a sense of what is local government, so our listeners can be a little bit more involved in the political process. And people have asked again, why is JFJ speaking on this matter? Let me put things in perspective. A healthy democracy requires civic participation from everyone. And one of the core or foundational ways that you can participate in the process is through the act of voting. So we felt it important to raise awareness around this so that we can improve that 30% voter turnout in 2016 to at least reaching the 40%, which is still low, but an improvement is certainly welcome so that we can lend legitimacy to the representation that we have. We have also sought to increase awareness around what is local governance. And having watched the debates last week, Jade, I'm not sure if you had an opportunity to watch the first debate on Thursday and the second one on Saturday.
I watched the first one, but I did not get a chance to look at the second.
I guess perhaps having watched the first, I can understand why people wouldn't have watched the second, because the first was so bad, wherein you had political cascas tracing, blame game, and so on, the political jobs. But I think the second, having watched that, it fulfilled what a debate ought to, for political reasons, where it shared information. You had an opportunity for courteous discourse between the two political parties. But there are some areas that were missing. But before I get into the areas missing, just very quickly, they touched on things like environmental impact assessment. That's an area, Jade, for us here at JFJ, as we focused on climate justice in the country, ensuring that when you're issuing these building permits, going into people community to go to bauxite mining, people are aware of these issues and how it will impact things like sewage, population changes, livelihood, and so on. Very, very important. But it also managed to break down some of the things that local government ought to be doing. And you heard Carol Narcis last week touching on it. The
Yes.
Public Accounts Committee, financial management, oversight, and so on. Quite missing. So I hope that the public managed to listen in and ask themselves a question. We heard all of the things that local government ought to be doing. I think the debate answered that. The second one, let me be very, very clear. But are the local authorities fulfilling those expectations as we have it? So that is something, I would want us to really ponder as we vote on February 26th and come out. Jade, having said all of that, any thoughts from your end?
You know, I I appreciate that the debate did happen.
Mhm.
As much as the first one was not exactly what we would have hoped, and I didn't have the opportunity to see the second one, which was more
Yes,
aligned with maybe what I was expecting. But it is a process that I think is important, in the sense that it would help us to ventilate these issues. And I prefer when we are voting on issues rather than voting on personalities. So,
exactly. Thank you. I think last comment to add from my perspective of last week as we levy criticism in that regard is that missing in action is the presence of third political parties, your NDM, your UIC, because it can't be what I call the two-party stronghold in our political system that alters and alternates powers between JLP and PNP. You should have a space where third political parties are able to lend their voice to the discussion because some of them are running. I think UIC has a few candidates across the island, NDM not this year. But in an event, you still need to have that voice to say what you're proposing don't make no sense. And I suggest this type of policy formulation ought to be explored. So those were the areas I think needed some oomph. But yeah, over to you, Jade.
thank you so much, Michael. So I'm going to go into my little lighthearted segment when we're going to talk about our right of the day today. And it is coming from our legislation that we're discussing today, which is the Disabilities Act. Now, our right of the day today speaks to Section 26, which talks about the rights of persons living with disabilities to access education and training. Now, educational or training institutions under this section can no longer refuse enrollment or attendance to a person due to their disability, and the institution must provide the necessary support for those persons living with disabilities to access the facilities. So it should be a suitable environment for their needs, and it should have reasonable access. Students should not be disadvantaged, and there should be reasonable arrangements made where that access is not already there. And then we have our trivia question for today, which is a simple one. On what date did Jamaica ratify the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities? So you can respond to that by responding to our social media posts at JA for Justice on Instagram, or you can send us a WhatsApp at 239-7583.
All right, so we're going to take the break now, and then upon the return, we go straight into the topic of this week, which is focusing on the Disabilities Act, where we know and looking at the matter of compliance.
Informative, educational, insightful. Let's talk justice and tackle topics like constitutional rights and reform, domestic violence, rights issues that affect you. Let's talk justice. Every Tuesday, 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. on The Bridge 99 FM. Call in, share your thoughts and questions. Be empowered. Know your rights. Let's talk justice. Courtesy of Jamaicans for Justice, JFJ, ensuring access to justice for all.
Justice, justice for all. Justice.
Tune in, log on and download the Bridge 99 FM app on your mobile device or tablet from the Google Play Store or Apple App Store. That's the Bridge 99 FM, all one word, in the Google Play Store and Apple App Store. The Bridge 99 FM, Caribbean vibes amplified. Download now.
Hi, I'm Ronald Thwaites, and I'm the host of The Public Eye and The Open Mind on the Bridge 99 and Irie Jam in the tri-state area. This program will tell you the truth about life back a yard. Fair, open talk. No gossip, no slander. We want to listen to your concerns. Also want to help you with your problems in JA. We at The Bridge rate you and affirm our oneness as citizens of this blessed land we love. So join us now on Wednesdays on The Bridge, crossing the waters, linking Jamaicans and Jamaican lovers everywhere.
The Bridge 99 FM, the Caribbean's cultural capital.
The people's champion. Our mission is love. Our vision is love. Jamaicans for justice. The people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, the people demand. Right to life and security. Oh, what a charge.
So let's start justice. We are discussing this week the Disabilities Act, and we will be joined shortly by Dr. Floyd Morris and Miss Janelle Williams. But before so, just a little bit about the Disabilities Act. It was enacted in 2014 and enforced on February 14th, 2022. Now, it is an important step in ensuring the welfare of persons living with disabilities in Jamaica, as the Act contains provisions that, when enforced, should ensure their protection from discrimination, as well as other behaviors that may exclude them from participation in society. The Act also now contains specific provisions that deal with non-compliance with the legislation.
No, I call the act that was passed on February 14 the Valentine's Day gift for Jamaicans and certainly those within the disabled community, because within that provision as well was a 24-month period for both public and private entities to retrofit their buildings to ensure that they are in fact compliant with the act. What is unfortunate though is that the Parliament, where our legislators sit, both houses of Parliament, the upper and the lower house, have not been adhering to the provisions in the Act. What is even disturbing, as we talk about the throne speech, last year's throne speech also had a promise that would see the retrofitting of the parliamentary building. Unfortunately, in December of 2023, Senator Lambert Brown, who had recently recovered from an illness, highlighted that, highlighted that he also had several challenges navigating the stairs at Gordon House. And he took the opportunity to remind Senate President Tom Tavares Finson that he had made a promise in 2016 as well to have seen the retrofitting of the parliamentary building. And he further pointed out that another 2015 promise was made that funds were in fact allocated to retrofit the parliament building for accessibility. Unfortunately, to date, nothing has yet been done.
Now, the senator would have rightfully argued that this is indicative of Parliament's failure to provide adequate access and accessibility, and that this impedes parliamentarians, particularly those who may be impacted, even temporarily, from fulfilling their duties. Now, earlier in July of 2023, a potential student of Merle Grove High School was the subject of several news headlines as a result of her inability to access the premises on which she would have passed her exams to attend. Now, later on, the Ministry of Education did make announcements that the school would be retrofitted. But now that the act is in place, we have seen recent headlines from a national newspaper that more than 700 schools are still awaiting retrofitting. So as we look at that situation, we'll be talking about where we are in compliance and what are the steps available for those persons who are affected by the non-compliance. And to do so, we are joined by Dr. Floyd Morris, Opposition Senator, and Ms. Janelle Williams, Legal Officer and Corporate Secretary at Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. Are you both with us?
I am here. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon, Ms. Williams.
Okay, are you hearing me clearly?
Yes, we are. Thank you so much for joining us. While we wait on Senator Morris to join us, I'd just like for you to share with our viewers. I know many persons are not fully affiliated with the provisions that are in the legislation. So if you could share with us, what are some of the things that the legislation prohibits that we should be aware of? Firstly.
Okay, sure. There are several parts in the legislation, seven specific parts that speaks to particular areas that have been identified where persons with disabilities should not be discriminated against. Part 5 of the Disabilities Act begins with a general clause that prohibits discrimination and protects persons with disabilities against being discriminated. The successive other parts of this legislation speaks to areas relating to education and training, employment, political office and public life, healthcare facilities, premises and housing, as well as transportation. So there are specific provisions outlined under these headings that I have mentioned, which prohibits discrimination and which imposes a duty on parties to ensure that whenever persons with disabilities have to engage with these various sectors or spheres, they are able to readily access these particular spaces or entities.
You know, when we talk about access, I think the first thing that we think about, especially with the example that we gave earlier, is physical access. And I think some of the things that you have spoken about in what the Act covers in terms of education and training, for example, and non-discrimination, that doesn't always mean physical access. So is there any provisions in legislation that speak to access outside of the physical?
The definition, so you are right, access is not just physical, but we tend to go there first. But we're talking about access to information, access to services generally. So the healthcare facilities, education and training, the ability to get a bus or a taxi home, those basic things, every kind of service, persons with disabilities are entitled to access them just as any other person. If we look at the definition of discrimination, it is very broad, and it is so broad that it would cover not just physical access, but information and services as well.
Just to jump in here, Ms. Williams, thank you so much for joining us. The question that Jade asked, if I may expound on it just a tad, one of the challenges that we have with access to justice for people within the disabled community, for example, is the lack of sign language interpreters. So they have gone to the police station to make reports on domestic violence. They have gone to the health facility to say that these are the needs that I have, but there's no one to sign to get a sense of what they're communicating. Are those matters also being reviewed to get a sense of the level of compliance, certainly within the public facilities?
So yes, the council will certainly take steps. We are presently engaged in seeking to audit certain places, and so we will definitely take steps to address that. Let me just know that under the Act, the definition for reasonable arrangement does speak to something that you have just mentioned. So when we talk about duly qualified interpreters, so something as simple as sign language interpretation. So yes, whether at the police station or anywhere at all that a person with a disability is seeking to get any particular service, that should be provided as a reasonable arrangement under the Act. Yes.
Great. Thank you. Senator, I hear you're now on. Welcome to the program again.
A pleasant good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much. We're remote here. We're not in studio, so we're trying to make do and ensure that we communicate well.
Okay.
But I know you have made some concerns known in the Senate recently. Could you just start out by just indicating to us broadly what those concerns are?
Well, I have consistently indicated that the Disabilities Act need to be taken seriously, and that the various provisions are in fact in force now, and government institutions by and large don't seem ready for the Disability Act, in spite the fact that the legislation was established in 2014. There was a long period of delay for implementation until it finally came into the effective date was set for 2022 with a further grace period of 2 years, which was expired recently. And even then, there are still institutions, and I'm pointing fingers at governmental institutions because they have to lead the way. The Act is applicable to private institutions as well, but government has to lead the way. And, there was a very disturbing incident at the Parliament on the ceremony in opening of Parliament, where I went to try and access parking in a disability parking, the sole disability parking at the Parliament, to get access to it. And right there was a government-owned vehicle, the Jamaica Information Service vehicle, parked in the disability parking spot, right? And if governmental institutions are transgressing the law, then I can't understand who else is going to pay respect to the legislation. And I am very grateful for civil society groups like yours to assist in that process and fight for adherence to the Disabilities Act.
Yes. Thanks, Senator. We overlook things as simple as parking spaces and the importance of it. So the question is, from your lens as a senator, how can you assist your fellow legislators to understand and comply with a law that they themselves have passed? What are some of the energies and the calls that will continue to be made from your voice, but also from your fellow legislators?
Well, I continue to move motions in the Senate. I mean, I had moved a resolution a couple of years ago. I think it was 2017. I had moved a resolution calling for the Parliament to adopt an audit that we had done whilst I was president. We had done an audit on the Parliament to examine what are the things that are needed to make it accessible. And a number of recommendations were done in terms of immediate, that's the short term, medium term, and the long term. And the motion that I had tabled was unanimously accepted, and there were some things that were supposed to happen are subsequent, and those have not happened. I've moved a motion calling for schools to become accessible for persons with disabilities in 2018. That motion as well was accepted unanimously, and it was incorporated in the Labor Day Project 2018 for what they call the Ramps in School project. That started in 2018, and it has not moved, right? I have moved resolution in the parliament as well on the issue of employment for persons with disabilities, because the research data that has been done is showing over 90% of the population of persons with disabilities unemployed. So when government is talking about the lowest levels of unemployment ever in the history of Jamaica, that doesn't apply to armed persons with disabilities, because the vast majority of the population of persons with disabilities in this country are unemployed, you know. So I keep on using the parliament to push that disability agenda. Whenever there are legislation that are being debated, I keep an open eye, no pun intended, on how to incorporate issues relating to persons with disabilities in those legislation. A lot of time I get pushback from the government, because, you know, I don't think individuals understand. You see, for me, whilst I am a member of the opposition, I don't play around when it comes on to disability issues where politics is concerned, because disability is not something that is unique to PNP people or to JLP people. It is affecting my Jamaican brothers and sisters, you know. So, I mean, take for example, I remember there was a legislation a couple of years ago when they were going to amalgamate Jamal and NYS into Heart. And when they formulated the legislation, I pointed out that they should include the issue of disability in the legislation to make sure that it is highlighted there. And the government at the time opposed the recommendation. I deliberately called for a divide in the vote, because I wanted to show, to see who was going to demonstrate a level of sensitivity. And when I called for the divide, every single government member voted against what I was suggesting. And today,
well, that's all for us, Dr. Morris. When we get back, we have to take the break so that Bridge can earn their money. We don't want to step in the way of that. But when we return, I want to get a sense from Ms. Williams to, you know, the level of compliance, you know, what else is expected in enhancing that. And then we return to you, Dr. Morris, so you can speak to us perhaps on what exactly we can, here at JFJ and yourself, ask each cabinet minister to undertake, especially with the upcoming sectoral debates later on in the year. We take the break.
Hungry for deals? Get the new Crunch Sandwich Combo from KFC for just $600. A finger-licking good deal. The time by KFC is
1:30.
Imagine your advertising dollar reaching your Caribbean and diaspora target beyond borders in a single rotation. It happens only on the Bridge. Call now to advertise 876-669-5000.
Remember to take your new voter ID card to the polling station on election day. You may still vote without your ID card, but the process will be faster if you have it with you. If you don't have your ID card, you must answer questions, be fingerprinted, and take an oath before you can vote. Bring your voter ID card and make it easier on yourself and others. That was a message from the Electoral Commission of Jamaica.
KFC!
crunch sandwich from KFC. Great flavor, great price, it's for me. KFC signature, hot and spicy. Chicken with the lettuce, mayo, fries and Pepsi. We've got you covered when you're hungry. The new crunch sandwich from KFC. We've got you covered when you're hungry. The new crunch sandwich from KFC.
Hungry for deals? Get the new Crunch Sandwich Combo from KFC. A small hot and spicy chicken sandwich with lettuce and mayo, plus fries and a Pepsi for just $600. Also available in barbecue. A finger-licking good deal. KFC.
The Bridge 99 FM, keeping the Caribbean connected.
The people's champion. Our mission is love. Our vision is love. Jamaicans for justice. The people's champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand.
Justice. We are discussing the Disabilities Act, and we are joined by Dr. Floyd Morris and Miss Janelle Williams from the Jamaica Council of Persons with Disabilities. Before the break, Miss Williams, we wanted you to maybe give us an idea of what compliance with the Act is looking like now that we have passed that 2-year mark, and what more we can be looking forward to in terms of compliance. I also would want you to give us an idea of what can be done in terms of making complaints where non-compliance has been observed.
All right, so three parts to that question. Let me get the first one in terms of what compliance is looking like presently. I do not have that data presently to share, but as I indicated earlier, the council is engaged in conducting an audit to see what is happening where compliance is concerned. Last year, we launched our accessibility checklist manual, and that manual is a practical guide to compliance. It is also on our website, and so it provides an easy-to-read breakdown as to what to do to become compliant in the event persons are unaware. We're also engaging in public education programs to let people know what the provisions are, to let persons with disabilities know what their rights are, and then, if needs be, they can go ahead and make a complaint. There are codes of practice that we have in draft, and so we're actively working to have those implemented into law. The codes of practice are, again, practical guides on being compliant in the various sectors. So whether it's education, healthcare, employment, etc., we are working on preparing those documents. As far as complaints are concerned, we receive complaints. We have been receiving complaints. And so a person with a disability or their caregiver can make a complaint under the Act. The complaint has to be in writing. Once we get that written complaint, then the council begins an investigation. And we have been doing that. Places are visited, depending on what the complaint is in relation to. We ensure that the matters are followed up on, and we are certainly utilizing the enforcement arm of the legislation as far as the Disability Rights Tribunal is concerned, as well as alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. So we encourage all our persons with disabilities or their caregivers, if you have encountered any treatment that you believe is discriminatory, it's prejudicial against you because you have a disability, then come to the council, make your complaint, and we will investigate. There's a 2-year period in which persons are required to make the complaint once the incident has happened. So within that 2 years, come to the council and we will investigate.
I had one additional question. You mentioned that the complaint has to be made in writing. If I am unable to do that, am I able to come into the council and be assisted by someone to get that complaint down?
Yes, you are. So do not allow, because we know our people with disabilities, they have varying challenges. So the council has the members of staff ready and willing to assist you in any way to make sure that your complaint is made.
Thank you so much for that. I wanted to quickly go back to Dr. Morris. At JFJ, we are constantly sending out our correspondence to our 63 representatives in Parliament. And I ask from your perspective as one of those representatives, what are some of the calls that we need to be focused on to improve the situation of those persons living with disabilities in Jamaica?
All right. First and foremost, the whole issue of access to education, that is a fundamental priority because the Disability Act expressly states that no educational institution should be discriminatory to persons with disabilities. And the way how the education system is structured in terms of accessibility, there are serious discrimination. We did research, albeit 10 years ago, which showed the vast majority of educational institutions inaccessible for persons with disabilities, over 70%. Then the issue of employment for persons with disabilities, that must be a major priority because, as I indicated earlier, over 90% of those persons with disabilities that we have surveyed have indicated that they are unemployed. So that is a major priority. The issue of health care for persons with disabilities, the various stigma that is associated with disabilities deeply entrenched in the medical system, and health professionals have to be trained in how to relate to these individuals so that they can access the various services, including sexual and reproductive health services. If you want me to go on, I can name a number of other areas, but I would have those as the three major priority, along with a major consistent public education program in sensitizing the country of the provisions of the Disabilities Act and how to relate to persons with disabilities. There have been over centuries of negative attitude towards this population, and having a 6-month campaign cannot change those negative attitudes. It has to be consistent and in your face. And those are some of my recommendations to my colleague parliamentarians.
Can I tell you, you're on the program, so if I may ask to you, on JFJ's behalf. One, we were disappointed with the recent amendments to the Domestic Violence Act that it did not go far enough, because one of the constituents that we serve here at JFJ who is subjected to domestic violence are members within the disabilities community. So I don't know if at the next Senate sitting you could ask what the status of the Joint Select Committee is, because we have to ensure that there are provisions in that revised Domestic Violence Act that properly caters to the community. So that's my first ask to you. My second ask to you as a senator, you have the constitutional reform process undergoing, and in the past, not only JFJ, but other civil society organizations have asked for disability to be an entrenched right within the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms. So that is another ask I would ask you as well in your own right as an advocate to champion, so that we can certainly have support publicly.
All right,
on that.
Just let me respond to both before you ask me another one, because one.
No, those were my two.
Okay, all right, because I will definitely follow up on the querying about the Joint Select Committee reviewing the legislation, and I must indicate that I have done research on violence against persons with disabilities in Jamaica. And I pointed that out to in the recent iteration of the legislation that was passed in the Parliament, that persons with disabilities ought to be given special consideration in these matters, right? As it relates to constitutional reforms, I remember back in, I think it was 2003, when I was Minister of State, I had made a presentation to the committee looking at the reforms then to include persons with disability in the Charter of Rights. And it wasn't accepted then because they said that we were working on the Disabilities Act, and the Disabilities Act would have taken care of that matter. But I respectfully disagree, because the Constitution is the fundamental legislation of the land, and what needs to be done is a simple amendment to the Charter of Rights to include and to state that no Jamaican, no citizen of Jamaica should be discriminated against the following grounds, and it currently lists the number of grounds. I would include disability in that. And then the Constitution has to be cleaned up because it have a number of negative nomenclatures as it relates to persons with disability, for example, imbecile and lunatic and so forth, criminal lunatic. All of those nomenclatures have to be expunged from the Constitution. And those are some of the things that I will be putting on the table in terms of this reform to the Constitution.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Senator.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So we're almost at the break. I'll just ask Ms. Williams to give us her final word on the Disabilities Act.
The Disabilities Act is here. We want to tell our persons with disabilities, the Act is here and it guarantees your rights just as any other citizen in this country, your fundamental rights. So the Council is working assiduously. I heard a discussion regarding the constitutional reform. We have written to that ministry that is leading that charge that explicitly in the charter there is to be a provision that persons ought not to be discriminated against because of their disability. And so the Council is working to champion, to advocate, and to ensure that programs and policies are in place that will guarantee the full inclusion of persons with disabilities in this country, and it will happen.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And that's some good work right there. We're glad to see that the constitutional reform conversation is happening because it's extremely important. Thank you both so much for joining us. We are going to take the break. And when we come back, Ms. Jackson is going to lead on our secondary topic, discussing the throne speech delivered by the Governor General. So we'll be back after the break.
Tune in, log on and download the Bridge 99 FM app on your mobile device or tablet from the Google Play Store or Apple App Store. That's the Bridge 99 FM, all one word, in the Google Play Store and Apple App Store. The Bridge 99 FM, Caribbean vibes amplified. Download now.
Your taxes hold the key.
Let's get digital. Get online this March 15. File and pay your final income tax return for 2023 and estimated return for 2024. There are so many options. JamaicaTax.gov.jm, direct funds transfer, NCB online banking, and Scotia online and mobile app. Pay your taxes the digital way. All returns must be filed online and on time. Tax Administration Jamaica, changing the way we do business.
JampJA.org. Mind the business JA with Jump Online. Are your business? Fi keep your government in line.
Use the MP tracker. Fi watch how them a move. The account meter help them improve.
Take action.
Use the Jump tool.
Track your MP cause they work for you. Mind your business JA with Jump Online.
Let's monitor government at JampJA.org. Funded by the European Union and the UK International Development.
It's Jamaican, it's Caribbean, to the world, on the Bridge 99 FM. You heard?
The people's champion. Our mission is love. Our vision is love. Jamaicans for justice. The people's champion. Justice. Justice for all. Justice.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice.
I tell you, say the synergy was off, but yeah.
Yeah. All right, so we're into our secondary topic. We just finished discussing the Disabilities Act, and we are now going to be discussing. What are we going to be discussing, Mikkel?
Throne speech, just a tad. But before we launch into that discussion, I just trust that, the listeners are seeing the importance of legislative monitoring. So, it takes years for laws to be passed, but when they are passed, then the implementation process has to be closely monitored to hold the government to account, and so too the private entities that are expected to comply, including nonprofit organizations such as ours. So we have to be revisiting. And even within the context of the political debates last week, not sure if you saw that it's a hiccup that happened wherein the sign language interpreter apparently wasn't qualified to be presenting, and well intended by the commission, of course, in ensuring that the provision was there, but it sends the signal that a little bit more thought and care ought to be employed by all of us who are meeting the needs of persons living with disabilities. Now, the throne speech. A question was asked about why we're making much ado about nothing, really. What is the importance of the throne speech, and so on. So unfortunately, we are still a constitutional monarchy where, the monarchy king right now is our head of state. And in that regard, the Governor General, who represents the monarchy, will deliver the throne speech. And that is a ceremonial aspect of it. So hopefully in a few years, we will get rid of that process altogether, with the Governor General being the one to deliver the throne speech. But irrespective of whoever delivers it, the practical component of a throne speech is that it sets the legislative agenda for the year as a new parliamentary session is opened. And in setting the legislative agenda for the year, you get a sense of what the plans are for the government, what laws will be passed, what key policies will be implemented. And then, of course, I hear the amount of money that the government will be expending. So this year is what, $1.3 trillion, the largest amount that we've expended. But of course, inflation had gone up. But that's another conversation to have. And then it sets the framework or the stage for sectoral debates to happen for a 6-week period, commencing April and going into May. And that is when you hear from your cabinet members, and the opposition spokespersons as well can challenge some of what has been said. And of course, the leader of the opposition to say, I hear what you're planning for that ministry. I hear what you're planning for that portfolio, but this is what I think. And you have that kind of active engagement happening in the House. Now, we listened to the Governor General speaking last week, and we revisited we have the written speech. It's online as well by now, I believe. But it's interesting that we're having the conversation about where we are now with the Disabilities Act, because promises were made in 2023, and when you revisit what has been promised this year, lacking in ambition, no accountability. Now, I took off my glasses, so I have to zoom in a little bit on the phone. This is what the sole mention about disabilities in the throne speech. Building on the progress made with the coming into effect of the Disabilities Act, an accessibility checklist, and you heard Ms. Williams mention of it, which serves as a practical guide for ensuring that the built environment is appropriate, was launched by the Jamaica Council of Persons with Disabilities in 2023. That was it. Nothing to suggest that I'm going to be putting a little bit of a greater thought in ensuring that the needs of the community are met, whether it is through some special provisions in PAC to meet some social program needs for them. What is expected of the Ministry of Labour, what is expected of the Ministry of Education that had made those promises that more ramps will be built. Lacking in ambition, so to speak, especially after we suffered a lethargy in having these laws being passed. So that is what we mean by the throne speech not hitting the right notes that it had intended to hit. You've heard JFJ, we made mention of it last week that we were anticipating some key things to be discussed in the throne speech. They weren't. One of the critical things, Jay, that we touched on was the corruption matter. Not one mention. And by the way, when we're reading these things, we read it, but to ensure that we don't miss anything with the word search here at JFJ. And we typed in the word corruption. Nothing. So the promise of unexplained wealth to ensure that when people are in public office, you see big car and big house and so on, I buy. But they say, but hold on there. Your salary is at X amount. Where you get that money from? And they are unable to give an explanation. That particular legislation missing in action. The Anti-Bribery Act that we recommended here at JFJ as well, during our presentation to the Integrity Commission as a supplementary recommendation, no mention of that, and I know National Integrity Action also called for it, Jade. Nothing, right?
Yes.
Corruption not mentioned. You have a joint select committee, 2 of them meeting since 2022 on protected disclosure, Integrity Commission, to ensure that the laws are there to protect you, to encourage you to make reports on corruption. Not even a peep to say, guess what? This is the status of the Joint Select Committee. My God, by sometime this year, we'll be hearing that a recommendation report will be tabled. Nothing. That's a priority area. I'm not sure if I want to touch on the Domestic Violence Act, because I think my pressure is raising a little bit, because I don't know if we should be okay with the only thing being mentioned there is that another shelter was built.
Yes,
Of the Domestic Violence Act.
I was very disappointed when we got to Ministry of Gender to find out that in terms of responding to gender-based violence, that was the only point that would have been mentioned. Last year, we would have seen the tabling of what we characterized and maintain was a rushed amendment to the Domestic Violence Act that did not contain all of the provisions that were expected even from the last review of the act, where the report was completed in 2018. And we saw the Joint Select Committee members named, and we were promised that there would be meetings by the end of January. We are now almost at the end of February.
Was it, did you see it written named in written format, or did we have to re-listen parliamentary sittings?
No, we listened to the sitting to catch the names of those persons who would have been a part of the committee. And since then, we have not heard mention of it. And even in the throne speech, there was no mention as to when that committee would be meeting or the commitment to finish that substantive review within this legislative year. So that was an extremely disappointing point for us.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that, for those who are listening in and say, oh, we're not making noise again. The Firearms Act had already dealt with the issue of firearm within domestic violence situations. So this was only ensuring that there was some alignment. So for us, we're not going to be touting or tooting the horn to be politically correct in how we levy criticism here at JJ, because we have to keep governments to account. So yes, the fines have been increased to what, $1 million. I think the period of imprisonment has remained at 6 months. Or did it go to a year?
It went up to a year.
For a year. But we're saying that's not enough. I want people to consider that when you have a protection order being issued, you, the victim, have to put measures in place to go and serve the protection order to the individual who abused you. Can you imagine? And that was not addressed. Nothing about a mandatory police response. So we're saying at this stage, at this juncture, much more was expected. But again, there is an opportunity for it to be addressed in the sectoral debates all the way down in May. But if it is that this throne speech is saying to us, these are the areas of priority of the government, then certainly these matters that have been languishing for years ought to have been dealt with. I want the public to also consider that the Access to Information Act, for example, that wasn't in last year. That was in a couple of years ago. That we're promising that the Access to Information Act that enforces your constitutional right to seek and receive information has not been amended since it was passed in 2002, even though the law requires it. No, this is 22 years later, and nothing except promises over the years. And keeping in mind that you are seeing where the public authorities, the agencies, whenever you ask for information, they're not adhering to the provisions in the Act. That's one issue. Much more to discuss. So when I get the information, it redacted, which means it black up all over the page. So you can't see any information on it. So there are many things that we're saying to the government that if you make the promises to the Jamaican people and the House of Parliament is to be respected, given we have elected you at the lower house and certainly for those 21 at the upper house, the Senate, you have been nominated, but with such awesome responsibility comes the care and respect in ensuring that they adhere to the promises that were made. So promises made ought to be promises kept. So no, the throne speech is not just some symbolic thing being read by the Governor General. The throne speech is a practical guide. So you have a sense in a very summative format. What is it that your parliamentarians will be doing for the year to earn their salaries, to earn the respect of the Jamaican people, that this is what I have done and this is my commitment to you. And I would say to JFJ, our civil society partners, that we have to do a little bit of a better job in holding the government to account by tracking these promises. 37 promises made, Jade, in terms of legislative commitments. Remind the listeners how many were made?
I believe it was 19.
And by the way, I keep saying that the 19 is not really 19 because some of them is some amendments. One of the examples I use is the Zozo Act. What it can go up to 60 days, I believe, or 31 of those 2 days. And they come and say, all right, let me extend the Zozo Act to a couple of months, and they do that. That is not anything that was actually in the agenda, So low-hanging fruit, and we're saying that Parliament has missed the mark in that regard. We have another minute or so left. Jade, a question that was asked this morning when we were represented on Smile Jamaica by the interviewers, Dela Harrison and Simon Clark Cooper. Where is the opposition in all of this? And I explained to their viewers that the opposition does have an opportunity by way of the sectoral debates to share their views. Unfortunately, what is read by the Governor General is the ruling party's agenda through their cabinet members. And I think perhaps there should be a space where the opposition leader lends its voice. I can't think of any country that has it, but it's a best practice, I think, in our humble opinion. But one of the things, for example, the opposition can table their private members' motion and move resolutions and so on. The issue, though, is that party majority has been used to silence those things. For example, the impeachment bill that was tabled by leader of the opposition. So things need improvement, certainly. And if the opposition can't voice their agenda in the House, they have to think of other means to certainly say to the people that this is what I want to do. These are the private members' motion I want to table. So we know that they're working for their salaries that they got as well. So a little bit more needed on both sides.
Absolutely. I'm in full agreement with that. And we are out of time. So you ended at the perfect time, Ms. Jackson. So I thank you all so much for joining us on Let's Talk Justice. We will be back next week at the same time. What was that?
No winner for this review? Quickly.
Oh, yes, we did get a winner for our trivia. Our trivia winner this week was It's Kimmy. Our question, as we said, was when did Jamaica ratify the UN Convention on Persons Living with Disabilities? And the correct answer was given by It's Kimmy, and that is in March 30th, 2007. So congratulations, and you'll receive your prize via DM. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we'll see you again next week at 1 p.m. I'm Jade Williams.
Yeah, Michael Jackson, enjoy the weather, please.
Jamaicans for justice, the people's champion. Justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Out of many we are one in a Jamaica. Make it a better place for the boys and girls. Created equal by the creator. For equal rights and opportunities. No to unlawful detention and police brutalization. class, gender, race or religion. We not tolerate discrimination.
To join the fight against injustice, contact us at 755-4524 or Jamaicans4Justice.org.
The people's champion.
The Bridge 99 FM.
Catch the KFC sponsored hour on The Bridge 99 FM every Friday at 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. in Up and Go to the